Gentlemen, welcome to the Camden Comedy Club. Will you please welcome to the stage Richard Stainbank. Thank you very much for coming. First of all, lower your expectations. I mean, not just in relation to this show, but in life in general. I think it's a good way to live your life. My dad said to me last year, "Richard, I've always wanted to own a copy of ABBA Gold." And last Christmas he achieved that dream. And now he drives around southeast London blasting Dancing Queen from the stereo of a Honda Accord. You know, he's happy. You know? Basically what I'm saying is, if you've come here tonight expecting to see some top-class stand-up comedy, you are inevitably going to be disappointed to encounter a performer who still worries about getting the microphone out of the stand. Which I do, by the way. I'm dyspraxic. I have dyspraxia, which is also known as clumsy child syndrome. Dyspraxic people have very poor hand-eye coordination, and they also find it very difficult to differentiate between left and right, which is why I'm doing really badly on Tinder. I'm kind of the Eddie the Eagle Edwards of Tinder, in that it's remarkable that I'm involved at all. That very much sets the tone for what's to come here, by the way. A lot of this stuff is going to rely on your ability to grasp two very disparate points of reference. But I want to manage your expectations. Basically, that's what I want to do. I follow a lot of comedy clubs on Twitter, and every so often they'll post up a photo with a caption along the lines of "Jimmy Punchline smashing it here at the Laughter Loft," without ever really clarifying what it is or why its destruction should be so wildly applauded. Basically, nothing is getting smashed this evening. Your worldview is not going to be changed in any meaningful sense. I'm kind of the comedy equivalent of a mild breeze, you know. Occasionally refreshing, often barely noticeable. And I don't want you to interpret what I've said as an attack on Jimmy Punchlines, because his problems have been very well documented. His grandfather, Mickey Punchlines, was a very popular music hall act, and Jimmy himself wanted to be an architect, but ultimately the pull of his family name proved too strong. I think quite often in life we're encouraged to follow our dreams, even when following your dreams is often wildly unrealistic. Follow your dreams, Richard. I cannot play the guitar to a professional standard. I am dyspraxic. Follow your dreams, Richard. There are no Premier League footballers north of 20 stone. Follow your dreams, Richard. Victoria Corrin is married. There's nothing I can do. It's difficult to know how to start a show. I kind of envy musicians in this regard, because either they come out on stage and everyone already loves them, or they have the wherewithal to drown out any potential dissent. I saw a band literally just up the road from here last year at the Coco, and the first thing the singer said into the microphone was, "If you all don't get up off your feet right now, we're leaving." And most of the crowd went, "Yeah!" And I went, "Yeah." I'm pretty sure that's breach of contract. If you all don't get up off your feet right now, it's a perfectly reasonable reaction to the situation at hand. Again, thank you very much for coming. This show is called The Wilderness Years, in part because it's about my time at Winston Churchill's house, and I was exceedingly reluctant to call a Churchill-themed stand-up show Finest Hour. But His wilderness years were the period in the 1930s when he was out of office and, from what I can gather, swanning around the south of France with Coco Chanel before coming back to either save the free world or narrowly edge out Hitler in a tight contest, depending on your point of view. Whereas my wilderness years, well, I've never had a full-time job, right? I'm not a fan of bank holidays, because when you're unemployed, every day is a bank holiday, in that I don't go to work and the bank is closed to me specifically. It's very common for a comedian to engage with an audience by asking somebody what they do for a living, and I fundamentally resent that. I asked someone what they did for a living at a gig once, and they said, "Oh, I work for Goldman Sachs." Don't worry, just in the IT department. Which is kind of like saying, "Oh, I work for the Ku Klux Klan." Don't worry, I just make the hoods. But the only thing I really need to tell you about the way that my life is going is that I will go home tonight to the house that I grew up in to be greeted by my mother wearing a onesie. Good evening, Mother. Zebra prints tonight, I see. What are my plans for tomorrow? I'm going to sit in my pants and eat an Arctic roll like a fajita. I don't really mind coming home to my mother dressed as a zebra. It's more when my dad stood behind her dressed as a lion. I did that bit at a gig once, and an American girl came up to me afterwards and said, "Zebra? Do you mean zebra?" I mean, sometimes the cultural gap is simply too wide to bridge. But in many ways, I've written this show for my mother, because I have never seen her laugh at anything other than someone else's misfortune. Like, if there was a Miss Schadenfreude pageant, she would win, and her acceptance speech would not be graceful. The most striking example of this that I can recall was the time I was on a family holiday to Ibiza, and I fell off the back of a pedalo, and she chortled as a large, jagged, rotating blade threatened to turn me into a teenage castrato. Still, I laughed it off afterwards at the foam party. And my mum's other foible is that she uses my eBay account because she refuses to put her own credit card details online, which results in me receiving a bi-weekly email with the subject line, "Richard, are you still interested in women's briefs?" Or, as I read it, "Richard, are you still interested in women's briefs?" My dad, meanwhile, he's kind of hot-headed, quick to anger. He takes steroids for a medical condition, not to get some sort of competitive edge. Although I do wonder why he has so many yellow jerseys. I told my dad I was doing that bit about him on stage, and he said, "You do realise that I was on EPO, right?" EPO being one of the banned substances used by Lance Armstrong. And that surprised me, because that was not at all reflected in my dad's time trials. But I have a certain affinity with Lance Armstrong in that I also struggle to come to terms with the fact that I've let a lot of people down. I'll tell you a little bit more about my dad. He's from a mining village just outside Sunderland called Hodenley Spring. He's basically from the part of the country that always declares first in elections because there are no Conservative votes to count. Right? Anyway, he moved down south and became a rabid Thatcherite, and the sort of person who wears a baseball cap celebrating the 2012 Paralympic Games whilst consistently voting for a government who cut disabled people's benefits. This is not a political show, right? And I'm not trying to character assassinate my dad. I'm guessing that you're a left-leaning audience and I need you on my side for this next anecdote. Due to circumstance, my father and I became religious watchers of the popular tea-time television quiz show Pointless. How many of you are familiar with Pointless? I mean, it's going to be most of you. I would think, but I don't want to leave anyone behind, so I'll quickly explain the rules. 100 people are given 100 seconds to give as many correct answers on a subject or topic as they possibly can. The contestant in the studio needs to find an answer that is both correct and that the fewest number of those 100 people also said, with the idea of finding an answer that none of those people have said, which is a pointless answer. The show is hosted by establishment fixture Alexander Armstrong and TV executive Richard Osman, by all accounts a very nice and popular man who nonetheless had become very wealthy off the back of stealing the format of Family Fortunes and turning it upside down. So, my dad and I get an audition to be on the show, and we are not at all on the same page about this. My dad thinks he's going to go out to London and have a nice time on his Freedom Pass, one of the many benefits the baby boomers now enjoy whilst selling their children down the river. No, father, I don't think 4% is a wide margin. I'm getting off track here. My dad wants to have a nice day out, whereas I want to drink the tears of our enemies on the way to thousands of pounds and the coveted pointless trophy. They always say that, the coveted pointless trophy. Personally, I wouldn't covet the pointless trophy any more than I would my neighbour's ox. But we get to the audition, right, and perhaps unsurprisingly, you play the game, except the sound of the column descending is made by an unenthused 22-year-old production assistant. And my dad is given a topic. That topic is Elton John Top 40 Singles. I think brilliant. We used to have his CD on in the car all the time. He'll have a cracking answer for this. I go through a few of them in my mind. You know. Are You Ready for Love? The Bitch Is Back. Nikita, Daniel, Someone Saved My Life Tonight. Saturday Nights, All Right for Fighting. Goodbye, Yellow Brick Road. Sorry seems to be the hardest word. I guess that's why they call it the blues. Any of those would have been fine. My dad says, well, you know, I've had a complete mental blank, so I'm going to have to go with Candle in the Wind. He's going to have to go with Candle in the Wind. Candle in the wind. It seems to me like you lived your life like a candle in the wind. The Candle in the Wind that was UK #1 twice. The Candle in the Wind that went 7 times platinum. The Candle in the Wind that is the second biggest selling single of all time behind Bing Crosby's White Christmas. Candle in the Wind. And yet if I throttled him in the middle of that hotel conference centre, I would have been considered the criminal. And I remonstrated with him about this on the way home, and he said, the thing that you have to bear in mind, Richard, is that I don't give a toss. And I said, no. The thing you have to bear in mind is my influence in the nursing home you end up in. 95, by the way, Candle in the Wind scored 95. The pointless audition kind of continued a pattern of failure that's been going through my life for quite some time. And I didn't think that it was going to be like this. I had sort of a grand-ish start in life. I was baptised at St Paul's Cathedral, which was, it was exciting for the family. I was largely oblivious to the situation. I wasn't giving it the big I am around the creche. Where were you baptised, mate? St Mark's? You're a fucking pleb, mate. But I remember mentioning this in a school assignment when I was about 8 years old. And I got that assignment back from my teacher, and she crossed out cathedral and written church. She didn't believe me. And I probably could have lived with that were it not for the fact that on my school report home, she'd written, Richard is a chubby child with delusions of grandeur. Any delusions of grandeur I might have had were swiftly beaten out of me by the world. My first job interview was at the age of 16 at the Clackett's Lane Road Chef, just off the M25. I didn't get it. I didn't get it, and that's okay. Failure isn't terminal. Unless, of course, you fail in an airport. And possibly the worst joke in the show. There might be a tally on that later on. 2 weeks later, the Clackett's Lane Road Chef on the M25 was voted the 3rd worst motorway service station in Europe. You're not supposed to fail on a continent-wide scale as a teenager, right? And it's kind of just gotten worse and worse from there. Once I genuinely had to answer the question, why do you want to work for Sports Direct? And the only reasonable answer to that question is I want to work for Sports Direct because I dream of an Umbro trainer stamping on a human face forever. It's unusual in stand-up to write a joke that actually becomes more relevant as time goes on. My second worst experience in job interviews was the time I had a job interview for a museum and they asked me to build a spaghetti and marshmallow tower. A spaghetti and marshmallow tower. A guy with clumsy child syndrome. You might disagree with me about this. I truly believe, in my heart of hearts, that the correct response to somebody asking you to build a spaghetti and marshmallow tower is to tell that person to go fuck themselves. I mean, that's just what I believe. You know, unless, of course, you're in the Spaghetti and Marshmallow Tower Building World Championships, in which case you will be penalised for your intransigence. But my worst interviewing experience ever was with the Ministry of Defence. It was on a military base. I was sat at the end of a table so long, I can only assume at one point it had been used for a medieval banquet. There were 3 interviewers at the top, and one of whom, and I'm aware this is a niche reference, looked and sounded exactly like Geoffrey Palmer playing Field Marshal Haig in the final episode of Blackadder Goes Forth. His cadence was essentially blah 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 blah. So, we're 2 minutes into the interview, and he says to me, "It says here that you're a stand-up comedian. Tell me a joke." I see, this is actually a very funny reference to the fact that this is actually the worst question that you can ask a stand-up comedian. And you are aware that a job interview is a whole inappropriate forum in which to ask it. His face has not moved, and a horrible realisation dawns on me, and the following comes out of my mouth. 2008 was the year the credit crunch hit, and it was also the year I told my dad that I wanted to be a stand-up comedian, so he too knows how it feels to make a long-term investment that he's never going to see a return on. Field Marshal Haig considered this. "Yes, well, I feel rather sorry for your father, actually." And I said, "I feel sorry for the families who have lost loved ones in a series of protracted and unwinnable conflicts." I did not say that. I desperately wish I had said that. I clearly wasn't going to get the job. I might as well have gone out with a decent retort. You know, the only thing I really learned that day was that it is very difficult to storm off a military base through a metal detector. I just think that you should show me a bit more respect. Yeah, sorry, I have got some coins in my pocket. Yeah, sorry, yeah. You know, I've got a lot of time for the military. It's just that, I am wearing a watch. Yeah, sorry. Edwin Starr once posed the question, "War, what is it good for?" And it is my contention that, well, yes, I am, but my trousers will fall down. And that is the story of how I waddled off a military base with my trousers around my ankles. I mean, it would have been a hell of a time for ISIS to be looking in. Perhaps they'd consider some of their terrible deeds. It's probably presumptuous to suggest that my buttocks have an anti-terrorist capacity. So, I was trying to keep busy around this point in time. I started volunteering for the National Trust at Quebec House, which was described in one TripAdvisor review as just not a very worthwhile place for the National Trust to own. Or for anyone to visit. Anyway, that was 3 years of my life. Quebec House is the childhood home of General James Wolfe, who heralded the British victory over the French in the 7 Years' War in the Battle of Quebec in 1759. And Wolfe lay dying on the battlefield, and he beckoned a soldier over to him. And the soldier said to him, "They run." Who? The French. In that case, I die content. And I think that's all any of us can ever realistically hope for. To die having consigned the French to yet another military defeat. But very little survives now of the Quebec campaign, except for a song that was written by Ned Botwood of the 47th Foot Regiment, in which, to use modern parlance, he calls out the Governor of Canada, the Marquis de Vaudreuil. It's an unnecessarily long song, so I've kind of picked up a couple of the more salient verses. Up the river St. Lawrence our troops shall advance. To the Grenadiers march, we will teach them to dance. Cape Breton we've taken, and next we will try at the capital to give them another black eye. Vaudreuil, 'tis in vain you pretend to look gruff. Those are coming who know how to give you hot stuff. With Monckton and Townsend, those brave brigadiers, I think we shall soon have the town about their ears. And when we have done with the mortars and guns, if you please, madam, a word with your nuns, each soldier shall enter the convent in buff, and then, never fear, we will give them hot stuff. It's an interesting document, isn't it? I mean, I can't help but feel like I've done with a rewrite, a fresh pair of eyes. All right, lads, do you want to hear my song? Yeah, all right, Ned, it's just that the last one involved you bumming the Governor of Canada before heading Todger first into a nunnery. I mean, we do want to win this thing, but we want to win it in the right way. And also, it is impossible to pretend to look gruff. Either you pretend to be gruff, or you look gruff. But Ned Botwood does deserve some credit for penning Hot Stuff 220 years before the Donna Summer Disco classic of the same name. Something of a trailblazer. One man asked me at Quebec House one day if it was true that General Wolfe had once been the landlord of the General Wolfe pub in the town. And I can only assume that he was, much in the same way that Winston Churchill spent most of his post-war career trying to get you a better deal on your car insurance. But I mean, the role kind of involved engaging with a lot of tourists, and I'm kind of envious of tourists because I'm fundamentally too poor to travel, and I have friends who travel about quite a lot, and I tried to make plans with one of my friends earlier on in the year, and she said, "Oh, sorry, I can't do that week, I'll be in Chernobyl." Okay, have fun. I mean, it feels unlikely. Do you want me to bring you back anything? No! No! I'm good. And we spoke about it a little bit more. And she says to me, "Well, Richard, the level of background radiation in Chernobyl is now no worse than you would experience on the average flight." That doesn't make it an attractive tourist destination. Visit Chernobyl. It's not as bad as you'd think. I have only left the mainland UK once in the past 5 years, and that was when my parents said to me, "Do you want to go on a weekend cruise?" Now, what I should have said was no. I am 23 years old and still have so much left to live for, and would rather not spend a weekend in the company of listless pensioners. But I didn't say that, and I found out a lot of things about cruising that I didn't know. For example, quite often you're required to dine with other people, which I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with if the subsection of society involved wasn't people who go on cruises. Hello, I'm Agnes and this is my husband, Ron. This is our 17th cruise. We like cruising, don't we, Ron? Yes, yes. We particularly like how it removes us from the arenas of excitement and intrigue. But these weekend cruises had entertainment laid on, and the one on our cruise was the opera singer, Russell Watson. And I went to his matinee show, and he was really giving it some welly in front of the most apathetic crowd I've ever been a part of, right? Time to say goodbye, that tutto versuto conte. Can you hurry up, please, Russell? It's nearly time for bingo. Ladies and gentlemen, I leave you tonight with the great Nessun Dorma. Nessun Dorma? I think I used to own a Nissan Dorma. Another contender for worst joke. Really decide amongst yourselves at the end. Anyway, this cruise was supposed to go to Zeebrugge in Belgium. And now, historically, there are three things the Belgians do well. Chocolate, waffles, long periods without a representative government.
Beer and chips.
Beer and chips.
Mussels.
Mussels. I mean, there's a comedy rule called the rule of three.
Sorry.
Right? I mean, it was part of the editing happened. I'm sorry. If you want to see the director's cut of this show. And frites. And mussels. You can edit that in, right, mate?
Yeah.
Anyway, this cruise was supposed to go to Zeebrugge, and I was looking forward to eating a chocolate waffle from an unlicensed street vendor. And there were thousands of elderly women desperate to get into Belgium. It was kind of like a reverse Brexit, essentially. And then the captain informed us that the cruise would not be stopping in Zeebrugge due to high winds. High winds. A century ago, people were confident enough to label a ship unsinkable, and you can't get from Southampton to Belgium due to high winds. To add insult to injury, do you know which film they showed in the screening room that night? In Bruges. It wasn't in Bruges. It was midnight in Paris. Something else we weren't going to experience. But it was a very expensive excursion. And the cruise therefore had one stop. It was in Le Havre. And yeah, all right. With the greatest of respect, no Englishman wants to go to Le Havre any more than a Frenchman wants to sample the delights of Portsmouth. Right? I was walking around Le Havre for 2 hours. The only notable thing about Le Havre is that it has one English restaurant, and that restaurant's name is Les Southampton. Oh, Ambassador, let us dine tonight at Les Southampton, where we shall feast on the finest toad in the Owl. But this was a very distressing time in my life. Things were going wrong. I was largely just wandering around South London, being sad at open mic nights. Obviously, I've come a long way since then. I was also seeing careers advisors for a while, and I went to see one careers advisor, and she asked me, in an ideal world, what I would do for a career. And I said, in an ideal world, I would be a professional stand-up comedian. And she looked at me like what I'd actually said was, in an ideal world, I would set up a Robin Hood-themed strippogram service in which I would play a character called Friar Fuck. Those other vacancies, by the way, Throbbing Hood, Big John, and Late Marion. But I was signing on. At this time, I was signing on in Bromley at a place called Unicorn House, which is a fun message for the unemployed, isn't it? The unicorn, the animal, as non-existent as your job prospect. But if you're on job seekers for 6 months, or at least at the time, you were shunted off onto a training course for 10 hours a day for 4 months. And now, I don't like it when comedians come on stage and they slag a place off, or they slag a certain type of people off. I think it's unnecessary. I think that it's cheap. However, I find it very difficult to be diplomatic about Lewisham. There were 2 notable things about Lewisham circa 2010-2011. One, in a shopping centre, it had a stall that exclusively sold sweet corn. Genuinely, right, I genuinely heard the guy behind the counter one day say, "Yes, sir, what can I get for you?" I'm going to go out on a limb here, mate. And I'm going to say sweet corn. You don't even have the option of having it on or off the cob. I assume off, they're not monsters. I don't really remember much about the training centre now, save for the sense of Orwellian bleakness. But it was around the corner from an acupuncturist, and there was a big cardboard sign in the window that read, "Suzanne Wong is back," with 3 exclamation marks. Clearly, this was big news. In their town, perhaps Lewisham's prodigal daughter had returned. Hello? Is Suzanne Wong back yet? Well, you call me the minute she is. No, I don't want to see Michelle Chang. Last time she left the needles in. So I went to this training centre. It mostly involved being shouted at by middle-aged women for hours on end a day. I mean, they're the kind of women who genuinely feel that acrostics have some kind of motivational purpose. You know, learning, engaging, welcoming, inspiring, supporting, helping, ambition, motivation. Lewisham. I've got one for you. How about loathsome experience with idiots, shite hawks and misery? I tried to keep my head down, right? There was a guy there who really didn't like me. He was called Terry. I was making notes one day, he was looking over my shoulder, he was going, "What are you fucking making notes for, mate? What are you fucking making notes for? I'll tell you your problem, mate. You think you're fucking William Shakespeare." 2 days later, he was put on a placement at a charity shop, and he was loudly complaining about that fact. Old women are rubbish. You can't talk to old women about football and shagging. Well, there are more things in heaven and earth, Terry, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. I fucking love that joke. It never ever gets this is the last chance for me to express my frustration. Finally, I reached the big time. I was called up to the National Trust at Chartwell House, the home of Big Winnie Churchill, the greatest Briton of all time, according to a poll taken by the BBC around the turn of the century, an achievement somewhat undermined by the fact that Princess Diana came third, a woman whose lifetime achievement seemingly amounted to marrying into the royal family and saying, "Watch out for that landmine." Inspiring the only Elton John song my dad can fucking remember. I mean, I'm not saying that the volunteers at the National Trust are old, but one of them offered me a Werther's original. I mean, for God's sake, I'm your colleague, not a German child. Once, I genuinely saw a man throwing a baby up in the air. That is a high-risk strategy, especially if it's not your baby. I mean, it's all fun and games until your baby is stolen by an itinerant falcon, if you ask me. What you're supposed to do, you're supposed to hold your baby above your head to give it an idea of what it would be like if it could fly, or if it was named heir to the Lion Throne. By the way, Can You Feel the Love Tonight, Circle of Life, 2 other songs that my dad could have sang. You met some weird people at the National Trust, fundamentally. One man asked me if I knew if there was still a smoking room at the Savoy, and sadly I was unable to assist, having not stayed there since my short-lived spell as a Victorian dandy. We had black swans down by the lake, and an American woman came up to me one day and said, "Those black swans, they seem very angry. Do you know the reason why?" You're asking me a separate question there, madam, which is, am I an ornithologist psychologist? My personal theory is that they hated the film Black Swan and have taken their anger out on humanity ever since. Swans, of course, famously unreceptive to the acting of Natalie Portman. But the thing that annoys me about Churchill is everyone bangs on about what a funny man he was, about what a wit he was. I know for a fact that he called the chicken coop in his garden, for a joke, Chickenham Palace, which is a really terrible pun, right? Awful. Particularly when you consider that right in front of his face was Cluckingham Palace. But Churchill once said, "History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it." And I think, generally speaking, I think that's correct in terms of how it's turned out. He's gotten away with a lot of stuff, which was probably just as well, because I had to give talks about his life. Hey everyone, thanks for coming. And remember, as Sir Winston once said, Islam in men is as dangerous as rabies in dogs. Any questions? Yes, you in the hijab. But I worked down in the studio that housed 200 of Sir Winston Churchill's paintings. In real terms, that meant a guy with clumsy child syndrome being put in charge of one of the 10 most valuable collections of art in the country. Like, I had a permanent contract, and I think I know why, because you know, if office staff get laid off, they'll ransack the stationery cupboard. If they got rid of me, I'd have a Monet. Would I have to leave the country? Sure, but it took them an awfully long time to catch up with Ronnie Biggs. That's all I'll say. Churchill is also credited frequently with popularising the phrase "black dog" in relation to depression, and I think it is a phrase that has helped a lot of people, but what it has also done is really muddied the waters regarding canine mental health. I mean, I know a chocolate Labrador who cannot walk down the street without somebody asking him if he's alright. But I had my first mental breakdown when I was 18 years old. I was cooking something in the microwave in my kitchen, and the microwave exploded in a plume of green smoke. Now, that is a double whammy. A, you've lost a microwave. B, smoke should not be green. Right? I convinced myself for about 5 minutes that it was mustard gas and that I was going to die. Right? The only time I want to see green smoke is if Kermit is named the new Pope. Which incidentally is the premise of one of my screenplays. There is another reason that I perceive myself to be in the wilderness, and it's this. I am a, what is the word? I'm a virgin, right? And you might have noticed that I kind of had to push that word out of my face, like a reticent skydiver from a plane. And a friend of mine assures me that pushing a skydiver out of the plane is actually the last thing you should do. And I would argue the last thing you should do is push a skydiver out of a plane without a parachute. What was I talking about? Oh yeah. I still buy condoms, right? I have no need for condoms. I have never had a need for condoms, but I still buy condoms, because to need condoms and not have them would be absolutely catastrophic. I mean, for me, contraception is like Trident. I don't doubt that my size is a part of this situation, right? I mean, I appreciate for women it is a choice between having this on top of you and not having this on top of you. It's not exactly Sophie's choice, even for a woman called Sophie, as I as I once discovered. I've tried going to Weight Watchers. I can't go to Weight Watchers anymore. Apparently it's unacceptable to go to Weight Watchers, put on £5 and then say by way of explanation, I've had a lot on my plate this week. I went to see my doctor a little while ago. He said to me, Richard, I think you would be a lot happier if you were 15 stone. I imagine I probably would, Doctor. I imagine I'd feel a lot happier if I looked like Ryan Gosling. Why don't we set ourselves some short-term achievable goals? I imagine that's probably what they say in all of those women's lifestyle magazines. The hardest weight to lose is that last 112 pounds. Ryan Gosling, incidentally, a much more popular actor in the Swan community. But I've read those magazines, you know, I know the sort of things that they say. You know, I wish I could just eat what I want all the time. You can. I'm living your dream. Anyway, back to that thing that I said that I hadn't done. There are days where I don't really think about it, and there are days where I don't think about anything else. And the transition between those two frames of mind is often quite dramatic and quite traumatizing. Like, I'll just be walking down the street with my headphones on. Oh, come on! Really? Not even once? What the hell is wrong with you? Not today, brain. No, mate. What we're going to do, we're going to have a long, hard think for 3 hours about what happened with Clara from uni. I was 19 years old. Clara was attracted to me, and I knew that she was attracted to me because she was not at all subtle about the fact that she was attracted to me, and sadly that is what I require. I was on a bus back to campus. I got on the bus, and she happened to be on it, and I went and I sat behind her, and she said, "Oh, why don't you come and sit next to me?" And I said, genuinely, because I don't trust you. And I deserve to be lonely. I think, fundamentally. I mean, this is deeply irrational. I know what I'm about to say is deeply irrational. There is still some part of me that thinks that all of you, collectively, will go down the stairs at the end of this gig and go, "Oh, what a troubled young man. He was right. My worldview has not changed in any meaningful way." How about, what are we going to do next, guys? What are we going to do next? We're going to stick around for a couple of drinks and then head on over to the Fuckfest. Where is the Fuckfest? I believe it's at the Underworld. Oh, splendid. Splendid. By the way, anyone who's been to the Underworld will know the perfect location for a Fuckfest. The floor's very much already sticky. I lived with 4 women at university, and you would have thought that might have been useful to me in like an advisory capacity. Instead, what happened was I went out one day and I came back to discover my room covered in post-its of vaginas. With helpful little drawings of vaginas, little captions, lick here, insert here, finger here. I feel like this kind of missed the point somewhat. I knew what a vagina looked like. It was more a case of seeing one out of captivity. I kind of have a theory that my life would be better if I were gay. And that's largely based around the fact that in the gay community, a large hairy man is known as a bear, and they are a respected and attractive type within that particular community. And the only 2 fields in which fat, hairy, straight men are admired are stand-up comedy and darts. And I can't throw for shit. And it's frustrating because if you type homosexual bear into Google, this is pretty much what you would get. Well, that and some questionable Winnie the Pooh fan fiction. You do not want to read 50 Shades of Pooh. It is harrowing, although turns out Eeyore was a sadomasochist the whole time. Explains a lot. I think quite often adults try to find reasoning for their issues as adults. They try to find the excuses for that in their childhoods, and I'm going to attempt to do that now. I went to a comprehensive school called Charles Darwin School, and had Charles Darwin lived to see the institution that bore his name, presumably he would have been disheartened by the lack of evolution on show. All right, mate. I'll see you outside after. I only remember kind of bits and bobs from my school days now. I remember I was 1 mark off an A in my A-level drama, which was in itself cause of A-level drama. But what I mostly remember was my teacher coming up to me just before my final assignment and whispering in my ear, "Richard, let go of your inhibitions." Now, I'll tell you something, right? When a 45-year-old man in corduroy whispers in your ear that you should let go of your inhibitions, you will hang on to every single one of those inhibitions for dear life. What I mostly remember about being a kid now is playing Sunday League football, and political correctness had come in, fortunately, so they had to let me play, despite my complete lack of physical fitness or indeed technical skill. But I was always a very intelligent footballer, in that I always knew why we were 8-0 down. I was often the reason. One half time, the opposition coach brought on a substitute and said to him, "I think you should be able to do their right back for pace." Absolutely, in the same way that you should be able to win a fist fight with a kitten. But we lost every game we played for 4 years. I don't think you can hang that squarely on me, to be honest with you. In fact, one year I genuinely won the Most Improved Player award on the basis that at the end of the season we were all equally terrible, but at the start I was the player with the most scope for improvement. And then came a development out of pretty much every sporting film ever made. We got a ringer in, a kid called Ashley. We played in an under-13s league, and Ashley was like 21, I swear. He was like so much bigger and stronger and better and faster than everyone else. He was a maverick. Nobody told Ashley what to do. You know, rumours spread around the schoolyard that he'd done porridge. And one day, we played another game, and Ashley scored a hat-trick, and we won 3-2. And the final whistle at the end of that game was like the end of the Mighty Ducks times 1,000, right? In my memory, like confetti went off, fireworks went off, spectators embraced, players embraced, a sailor kissed a nurse in Times Square, Emilio Estevez was smiling in the corner, and I was stood on the side of the pitch with a broken arm. This was an injury I had sustained some 3 months previously. There was another boy at my school playing for the other team who shoved me to the floor. I don't really remember his name now, Harry Wilkins. I knew that the best way of coping with being shoved to the floor would be to hold my arm at an angle and let my entire weight come down on it. And Wilkins then spent the next 2 weeks telling everyone in the schoolyard that he had meant to break my arm, which was rather at odds with the ashen-faced expression he had shown when I was loaded up into the ambulance. But I get it, you know, the schoolyard currencies are not decency and contrition. I had hoped for more sympathy from my PE teacher when I showed up to my first lesson with my arm in a cast and informed him that I would not be taking part. "Oh, I see. You've got a broken arm, have you? And I'm supposed to believe that that's some kind of excuse!" "I'm just messing with you, kid. Sit down." Now, from a distance of 16 years, I understand why that's funny. At the time, not so much. But I wasn't the only victim. There was a boy in our class called Stephen Weston. The ball was played across to him one lesson. He was 4 yards out. He missed the goal by miles, leading to the immortal cry from the other side of the pitch, "Weston's had a super mare." I came home after uni, and my local gym is actually attached to my old school. So in an act of repetitive futility to rival Sisyphus himself, I made the same journey back and forth and back and forth and back and forth that I had made as a kid to use the same changing rooms that I had used as a kid. Still smells like Lynx and Fear. The school have an arrangement with the gym that the older kids can use it for a couple of hours after school. And one day I went along and there was a stand there offering chlamydia tests to 16 to 18 year olds. And what the guy manning the stand should have done was seen that I was not 16 to 18 years old and let me go on my way. Instead, he offered me a chlamydia test and I politely declined. And he said, okay, well, let me know if you change your mind. For me to change my mind, something extraordinary was going to have to happen in the next 90 minutes. Although it remains good practice to wipe down the machines afterwards. So, we get to 2015. I've been at Chartwell for 4 years. I'm getting sick of answering variations on the same question. Did Churchill paint all of these paintings? Did he really? Really? Well, how did he find the time? 20 times a day. So I trudge back to Unicorn House and I take part in a recruitment session for a crucially unnamed British bookmakers. And we're asked to go around the room and say what our favourite sport is and why we want to work for them. And the woman before me says, I'm Karen, I don't like sports, and I need a job. Oh, Karen. Even I know that's a bad answer, and I'm a fucking catastrophe. I sort of saw it from the other side. I mean, I appreciate Karen's probably had enough by now. Karen clearly doesn't give a shit anymore. I mean, on some level, I have to admire that. But she really did a favour in the moment. She did me a favour in the moment because it made my answer to the question seem so much better. And I got an interview, and I was honest. I was honest about where I was at, what I felt I could offer, what I'd done, what I wanted to do in the future. Crucially, nobody asked me to tell them a joke, and I got the job. And you know, it's not full time, but it's a lot closer than I was. It's a 10-minute walk from my house, which is both convenient and massively suffocating. I have to serve many of my former school friends. You know, as victories go, it is smack bang in the middle of the category marked Pyrrhic. Coming up next on Betfred TV, we'll be off to Wimbledon, where once again we will be exploiting dogs for profit. 6 weeks in, my boss said to me, imagine doing this for 40 years. And I said, no. Because working for a bookmaker's, it means engaging with people who feel compelled to bet on a horse because it shares a name with them or one of their family members. I gotta go with Lucky Pete, and I gotta go with Lucky Pete. Pete's my name. Well, no, you don't. He's 200 to 1, he's got 3 legs, and he's off his tits on ketamine. What it also means a lot of the time is standing in a room with 11 other people in it, hearing a commentator say, dog number 5, he just performs better when he's wearing red. And being the only person in that room who wants to question that statement. But, you know, it's a start. You know, it's a reason to get up in the morning. You know, and I don't want to keep defining myself by the things that I haven't done. I want to define myself by the things that I have done. And what I want out of life in the short term, I just want 2017 to be a little bit better than this year. And I want 2018 to be a little bit better than that. And by 2019, I would really like to get laid. It's difficult to know how to end a show, but if you all don't get up off your feet right now, I'll leave you with some words that a man once said. Never, 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 never give up. Thank you so much for coming, and I'll see you again sometime. Good night.